Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and our first international championships are finally back. The long-awaited huge event coming up in Germany here. The European International Championships will be the first, kicking us back into the swing of things. And we've got three fantastic players here who have done well in their respective regionals and are looking to do well once again in the International Championships. They're all very accomplished players in their own right. We're going to go around the horn talking about, well, just a quick introduction for them, as well as what they played in their most recent regional. And also, we will jump into the metagame, of course, as well. So let's start off with you, Robin.
Hi, yeah, I'm Robin, and I recently won in Liverpool with Urshifu and Talion.
All right. Xander?
I'm Xander Perot, and I finished top 8 at Salt Lake City with Arceus and Urshifu V.
And Stephane?
Hi, I'm Stefan Ivanov, and I only made top 16. At Liverpool Regionals, I was playing Malamar in Leon.
Yeah, so we have three great players, all picking very different decks. And obviously there's different ways to succeed in the TCG, but none of you actually played Mew, and that's where we're going to start off today, because most people expect that to be the most popular deck, the most powerful deck in the format. So each one of you just want to say why you came across a different deck as your specific choice, and is that still the reason why you're not looking to play Mew possibly for the EUIC, or is that something that's back on your radar now? Should we start with you, Stefan?
Right. So yeah, Mew is obviously a very good deck. Obviously, a very strong deck. It can beat basically anything if it sets up well. The only issue is that everyone knows that, right? So it's not a surprise. Everyone's preparing for Mew. Everyone, especially after Mew won and kind of dominated, I think, in Brisbane. Was it Brisbane, right? Yeah. So I think everyone knew that Mew would be on everyone's radar, and so that's personally that makes me, try to consider other things because I don't want to be playing the deck that everyone is preparing for. I think that Mew is like usually I want to avoid as well the mirror matches because they tend to be a bit too luck reliant. Mew isn't actually the most random mirror match. But still, if I can avoid playing that, I would rather. And it was one of the decks I considered playing, right? I had a Mew deck ready, and I felt fairly confident with it. But I also I wasn't confident that I had like the best list for the metagame or the best list to beat everything. And I was afraid that if I played against people who were very experienced with Mew more than me or with other decks, they would know how to beat me, and I wasn't prepared enough against the most difficult matchups. So that's why I wanted to play something else. I think Malamar was a good call in Liverpool. I think that people were starting to catch on that it was better than its play rate would suggest, but it was still not played that much, so it was not countered that much. And so I think that it was a good call, and I mean, you made top 8 yourself with it, right? And Brennan got top 2, and there were a couple of others over Malamar towards the top of the ranking. So I think it was a good call for that event.
Yeah, absolutely. And is that still where you stand with Mew? Do you still feel more comfortable playing other decks, or is there any reason for you to go back towards Mew?
I mean, it's still always something I consider. It's not. I tend, as a general rule, I tend to not to play the deck that everyone expects the most. So I don't think I'm gonna play Mew, but it's still something that I play test. It's still something that I'm trying. And if I find a list that I feel really confident with, and maybe if I find some random tech or something that people are not adding and that might give me a small edge in the mirror match or in some other matchup, I might end up playing it. I don't know. I'm certainly not ruling it out yet.
Sure. Xander, what about you?
I would say going into Salt Lake, I was planning on playing Mew, just because that's the one deck I played in a few online tournaments. It's the best deck in format, that sort of thing. And really, when I got there, that's when our whole testing group sat down and thought of, are we going to play Mew, or are we going to find something that beats Mew? And what we ended up coming to is that Arceus and Talion is good against a lot of things, but Mew can be a bit of a problem because your game plan is just path and stick. We also experimented with Arceus and some dark variants like the Crobat VMAX, but that was good against Mew but awful everywhere else. So then the main thing is we found a deck that we felt confident enough versus Mew, but then would also give us playability into other decks with the Inteleon. Also is very consistent. We couldn't just lose to a path on turn 1 or 2, so our goal and my goal now for EUIC is to find a deck that gives me the ability to sort of exercise my skill. And although I think Mew takes a ton of skill to play, specifically in sequencing and where to put your fusion energies, how to plan out your game plan, so much so that it scared me off of playing Mew before and still does now, because I haven't played hundreds of games with the deck. I don't know how to play it perfectly. I don't expect to within 2 weeks, week and a half. So definitely hesitant to play Mew now for the fact that it's really difficult. People expect it, and not really my cup of tea anymore now that I found other decks that I enjoy and feel more comfortable with.
Makes a lot of sense. And for you, Robin?
Yeah, like I think Mew is obviously really good, but I just feel like it needs to, like, you need to work way too hard to win your games with Mew in this format. There's just so much to worry about. Like, you don't particularly love playing against all the Moltres decks, and also everything else just plays path, and you have to be constantly worried about path, just always like using like your phones and cups or whatever for your stadiums, and even then you can just get randomly lose against path, or like get random path judged. And I think it's really hard to play it optimally against all these decks that are designed to beat it. And even though I think it's still pretty even or just slightly unfavored against most decks that counter it, it's still, you have to play really well as the Mew, and if you just make like one misplay, it can just instantly lose you the game. And even if you play well, if you just draw a little bit awkwardly, you can just fall behind too much and just lose off that. So I just don't really feel like it's worth it to play Mew, and I don't really see myself playing Mew at EUIC, even though it's obviously a really good deck.
Yeah, definitely. It's in that point where it's been around for long enough that the dedicated Mew players, you basically have to be a dedicated Mew player at this point to actually feel confident in in all the matchups, I think. So it certainly is like sort of tip your fedora to the people who are still playing Mew, because other people have found other decks to play. Speaking of which, let's go to you, Xander, as the resident Arceus Inteleon, which has risen to the top recently in Sao Paulo. What did you think, first of all, about their list compared to some of the things you chose to play, like Bibarel, for instance? And what do you think about some of these other inclusions? Like, where's your head at with like Dunsparce, with Sydney, some of these like tech cards? Where are you really feeling with the deck? And in general, do you just still think it's a solid choice?
Yeah, so I think that our list was really good for Salt Lake City just because of fighting decks really weren't that prevalent. The only thing that was prevalent was the Zapdos, and for decks that weren't playing Cape of Toughness, you could still knock it out in return. It was really the Cape that threw that matchup over the edge. In terms of that person's list, I do like the Dunsparce and have it in like Arceus list now going forward, just because of after Liverpool, Robin's success in Liverpool with Urshifu, it's a lot more on the radar. And also just Zapdos is still around, so it doesn't hurt to have that card for it. So Dunsparce is definitely an auto include in like mainline Arceus decks now. Some things about the list that I do like too is I like the 2 Research 2 Marnie. That was going to be the first thing I change after my run in Salt Lake City, is just make that simple swap. Research is really good, but Marnie is also really good, especially when your game plan against Mew and other decks are to path Marnie. Our secondary supporter against Mew was the Sydney, and I think it's a mistake not to play Sydney in an Arceus Inteleon deck, just because you can't reliably like get Mew with a path, and especially because that person's list was only playing 2 path. I think that they like just scooped a Mew with no path, or only 2 path and no Sydney. So I'm surprised that he won games against Mew. Other than that, Melanie and Raihan, good cards. No B-Barrel. I think B-Barrel is really important just because in all your matchups, it's just ways to draw more cards, because Drizzile can get you things, but B-Barrel can get you anything. And also against Mew under Path to the Peak, you really need that draw engine of B-Barrel in order to like just do things under Path. And then lastly, the nice thing about the B-Barrel is that it supplements the Ultra Ball engine, so you're more likely to get Arceus down turn 1. So just overall, the deck is a lot smoother with B-Barrel in it. You can cut a Drizzile, so play 3 Drizzile. And if you're already playing 3 Drizzile, then you can just find some other cuts like the Collapse Stadium should be a path in my opinion. Other things like second Sharon's Care, not so necessary. 4th Drizzile, not so necessary. Maybe even Raihan, excuse me, not that necessary because of the Melanie.
Sure. Is Water Energy still your favorite way to play Arceus, or have you been tempted by, like you said, that Crobat VMAX like mini package, any of these like Dark Clara things going on?
Yeah, I'd say that the not the Crobat VMAX, just because at the end of the day, you're still a beefy VMAX gives us 3 prize cards. What I'm more interested in trying and have been trying a little bit are like the baby Galarian Moltres versions that are the dark oriented, closer to what Peter Lowe played in Brisbane, and then also closer to what Ian played in Ian, Rob, and Nick Moffat played in Salt Lake City, just because the dark strategy is just a surefire way to beat Mew. You don't even have to rely on Path or Sydney. So you almost are invariant to the Mew player. You're playing your own game of solitaire, and you just have to make sure that you knock out the Melowite at the right time and have your Moltres ready for the Mew. So if anything, I'll be playing some dark Arceus version, but the fact that you have Melanie is really important. The fact that you can Aqua Bullet really easily is also very important. So also, I could totally see myself just playing another Arceus water deck, sort of say, okay, I'm probably unfavored against fighting decks, but with Dunsparce, maybe a Manaphy, at the end of the day, just hope for the best and hopefully win the rest of the games because it's favored against everything else.
Do you feel like Manaphy is enough? Actually, let's ask Robin. Would you be scared of playing like your Urshifu deck if they were playing Dunsparce and Manaphy, or do you still feel like it's still pretty favorable for your Rapid Strike Urshi list? Because I think there will be a lot of knee jerks of just saying, I still want to play Arceus. Let's try and shoehorn these techs in to make it closer.
Yeah, it would certainly be a bit more difficult, but if Urshifu draws well, I think it still beats Arceus even with Manaphy. Like it makes it a bit harder because you can't just rapid flow the Dunsparce, but like you can still deal with it. It's yeah. Like I think it's okay, but it's not like winning the matchup.
That makes sense. And I guess especially if you still play the Cheryl, you can still just like Gale Thrust through the game and like try and play that heal game plan. Are you pretty happy with the 60 that you crafted? Well, obviously for Liverpool, but do you still feel like it like stacks up with people adding potentially new techs going into EUIC, or are you still more or less content with the 60?
I'll probably change like 1 or 2 cards maybe, but I think the list still works, and I wouldn't change too much. Like I think you can't change that much. It's pretty specific with the game plans and everything, so there's not that much room. You could cut some of the tech cards for other things, but then you lose some power, so I don't know if I like that.
And just one more, now that it's like a known quantity, does that concern you at all? Now that people sort of know what attacks you can do in sort of what sequence, does it change your game plan for any of the matchups? Or it seemed like it was kind of baked in that you already had so many options that you could react to the opponent in a lot of ways already.
The deck didn't rely on the surprise factor, but it was nice, certainly, and it does hurt it a little bit, but I think if it draws well, it doesn't really matter. What's a bit more concerning is if people add tech cards like the Manaphy into some decks, or like more hand disruption cards, which is really annoying. So that's definitely concerning.
Yeah, I think even Azul's talked about Marnie and Mew now, and I think there could be some people on that bandwagon because that Galarian Moltres is a package that's going into Arceus and obviously your Urshifu deck as well. Stephane, let's talk about some Mali together as some Mali gamers. Me and Brennan both got knocked out by the Urshi Moltres Hooper deck. Does that concern you at all? Does the success of an Arceus Inteleon with Water Energies concern you at all about playing Malamar? Are you still more or less content to play that deck? Where do you think its metagame is?
No, I think Malamar is getting worse now than it was a few weeks ago. Because, well, not that much because of Urshifu. I think Urshifu, first of all, it's beatable. I mean, maybe not. I actually haven't played against Robin's variants, and especially not against Robin himself.
That's
or
right. When it's
who are
Robin, it's
really
harder.
playing the meta better. And I think like you might think that the dark package wouldn't change anything, but Hoopak and it can actually take easy prizes early game. That can change things. But I don't think I definitely think that probably matchup is unfavored, but I don't think that Urshifu is too much of a concern because it's not played that much. It's not an easy deck to play, and you can have trouble with Mew, so that deters people from playing it. I just think that there's a lot more Arceus now, especially Arceus Inteleon, and many people are playing lists that are very dangerous for Malamar. We are seeing like the double Charon Scare can be annoying, but And with Big Charm, it's not easy to take knockouts. They can attack with Inteleon, with Aquaballet. If they play the Zigzagoon, they can potentially have double scoop up net and take one extra prize with knocking out Malamar and an Inkay on the same turn, which is devastating. You need another Inkay in play, but that means you have to adapt your bench, so it's very difficult. And and also there's some more bench disruption. I'm seeing a little bit more of Avery. I don't know how popular it will be, but it's a very dangerous card for Malamar. And I've even seen, so again, I don't know how popular that will be, but I also seem to be seeing a bit more Jolteon VMAX recently. So I don't know if that's just online or if it will translate to an actual play rate in EUIC, but that is concerning for Malamar. So it's not. I think Malamar is right now not at the best time to play it. I'm sure some will make day 2, but it's still a very good deck, and it can still beat. It still has a pretty good Mew matchup, and it's not unplayable against Arceus. But it deals better with Arceus Burst or some other Arceus variants than with the Arceus Inteleon that just won San Paulo. So I think people are playing this a lot more right now. So that's why it's not perfect in the metagame right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think exactly the same. It was kind of like that hidden gem for Liverpool, but it's just as soon as it's on the radar, you're such a delicate deck that it only takes those tech includes or just people playing against the deck more to be a lot more awkward, I think. Let's talk about some Jolteon then. I feel like it's one of those decks that people kind of just like rag on. They say like, oh, you only win because of Marnie Path, and like it feels like a cheesy deck, right? Because its wins come from like winning in the first couple turns just by stopping the opponent setting up, but it seems to still be a valid strategy. I mean, before Brilliant Stars, it was like the second best deck. It's kind of creeping back into easily the top 10, I think, like probably into the top 5 or so decks. Do you feel like it's going to be not necessarily a popular choice, but something that you have to consider in the metagame now? Let's go for you, Robin. What do you think about Jolteon?
I think the deck is okay. Inteleon is just the best engine currently, and Jolteon is the best counter against Inteleon pretty much. It has always been really good against Inteleon decks, and I think that alone makes it a viable option, because it usually just beats Inteleon decks. And it's not that good against Mew, but it can win with Path, so I don't know. I don't love Jolteon right now, but I don't think it's the worst pick.
Xander, anything else to say on Jolteon?
No, I think Robin hit the nail on the head. It's a good deck. You beat Inteleon decks most of the time, especially going first, because you can just knock off a Sobble, maybe even Boss Terror Escape Rope to take out 2. So it's just a strong deck, capitalizes on an opponent's slow start. Marnie's has always been a good card, Path is a good card, and just pretty consistent in what it does. And if people don't play Manaphy, and if it doesn't play against fighting decks, and also if Mew doesn't get 4 Fusion Energy in play, it's really good. But turns out that thing happens probably pretty often on day 1, and don't make day 2 then.
Yeah, and I think people will be at the 4 stadium count for Mew now. I think they're at that point where they want to respect the Path decks enough a lot of the time.
Either this or Pumpkaboo, right?
Yeah, like even Pumpkaboo. Would you think about things like Pumpkaboo in Genesect Mew? At the moment, honestly, where I'm at is I'm at like 3/4 stadium and maybe like Marnie to be that like 5th card to help me out against Path. What do you think about Pumpkaboo? I know some of my testing group are on it as well.
Right now I'm liking it. It has certainly, like, even you with 4 stadiums, sometimes they just, you draw 2 stadiums and then they Marnie Path and you don't have your stadiums back. But Pumpkaboo, if you play a couple of fog crystals, you have a lot of outs to it. And it's 1-me games against Jolteon, against things like this. So I'm liking it. At first I was not really. I was thinking, okay, this is not optimal. It's just something. It's a clutch that you play if you're not really confident. But then I saw that Gustavo Wada used it to win the cup during day 2 of San Paulo Original. So I was like, okay, let's try out his list. And I like the Pumpkaboo. So I don't know how popular it will be. Maybe not that much, but I think it's a good option if you're playing Mew and you're scared of Jolteon or any Path deck.
it's one of those things that lets you sleep at night, the night before the event, because you're like, I'm not just going to lose to this cheese most of the time.
Yeah.
So it may not be worth the space, but I understand the reasoning behind it. Let's talk about some more Inteleon decks, because Suicune Ludicolo is sort of made a bit of a comeback, but it hasn't really been picked up by the masses. This still feels like that sort of 3% meta share deck, but do you guys respect it? Would you guys think about playing this archetype going into EUIC? Where do you sort of place it right now? Let's go for you, Xander.
I would say it's definitely one of those decks that I'm thinking about, but it's so low on the radar that it's not super into consideration. I would say the big 3 decks that I'm worrying about are Mew, Arceus variants, and then also Urshifu variants. Just because those are the big three, at least in my opinion. Other things that are on my radar, like Malamar, Jolteon, those are more secondary. And then I would say Suicune falls into that same sort of list, where if I'm playing a deck, it's not like a deck that I create will auto-win Suicune or be really poor against Suicune for the most part. It's just kind of a deck that exists. It has the similar issue of Marnie is pretty good at the right time, and it's pretty easy to capitalize on it when you're playing Arceus if you get a strong start with the Choice Belt and stuff like that. So I would say it's a deck that I have on my radar, but I don't expect many people to play it, just because it's pretty complicated, as well as not super popular nowadays. There's a lot more spotlight on other decks, so even if it is really strong, it's just not getting that much attention.
That makes a lot of sense. Does anyone else have any big opinions on Suicune Ludi? Has anyone tested a lot of it, or is it just one of those things that you kind of expect? Maybe you've had a few games against it, but don't want to rep it yourselves.
Yeah, not really.
All right.
It's been doing pretty well in some recent online tournaments, right? I think there was a tournament where it either won or it got like double top 4 or something. I don't remember exactly. But yeah, I think it might be a bit underrated right now. But again, I agree with Xander. It's not like at the top of my priority list. Definitely, I want the things I want to be prepared for are Mew and Arceus decks, and Suicune is very secondary compared to that. But I think that it definitely has potential.
Let's also talk about Gengar, which did really well at Salt Lake and was like way up on the radar, but then couldn't follow that up at all, basically, in Liverpool or in Sao Paulo, really. Do you think this is, is it even worth just having a deck that is pretty good into Mew and like average against most other stuff? Or do you think it's consistency that's holding this deck back? Let's go for you, Robin.
I don't know if it's really the consistency. I think the deck is just kind of average. It's not that great. It can easily lose against Mew. I think if the path just doesn't stick, you're not actually that good against Mew. And if if the Arceus players play the Dunsparce, then your random fighting tags also don't really do much against that. And you get KO'd by Zapdos, and I just don't really think there's too much reason to play the deck, even though and it's not the worst. It can definitely win games, but it's not really a deck that I don't think there's much reason to play it.
Do either of you have any strong opinions on Gengar? Is it more or less like fading out of the meta more than anything else?
I think I actually think it might be underrated right now. I think I don't like the deck. I don't want to play it. I don't feel. I feel like it's too not random, but yeah, it's not reliable. You can hit bad starts. You can sometimes you can just be like, okay, all I need is a switch so I can attack again, and then you research and you draw from 4 more cards with barrel, and you just don't hit the switch. Things like this. So it's not it's not something that I would rely on. But I think that right now, with the Arceus Inteleon players playing more sort of pure Arceus Inteleon, maybe with baby Moltres, but a little bit shying away from Zapdos because it didn't do as well as the pure variant in San Paulo, and because more people are playing Dunsparce in Arceus lists, so it's not as valuable. I think that's one fewer threat for Gengar, and that makes it a bit better in the metagame. Obviously, Urshifu is an issue, but again, I don't know how popular Urshifu will be. So I think there's like kind of a niche for Gengar to maybe. I could be completely wrong, but I could also see Gengar doing very well just because it hits favorable matchups. As Robin said, the Mew is not an auto win or anything, but it's still fairly favored. If you can stick up after the peak even one turn, you can really get out of tempo very fast. So they have to remove it as soon as you play it. So that's why the deck is favored against Mew. So yeah, I think Gengar might not be like it's not. I wouldn't count it out of the metagame. I think it would be wrong to say, yeah, that's gonna away, but that's not coming back.
That's actually a really interesting take. It's given me a different perspective of the deck. Let's move on to like this big lump of Arceus Other and start sort of nitpicking at some of these, because it seems like Arceus is sort of minimum tier 2, right, with whatever you pair it with. So I'm going to throw out just some, and you guys can sort of see what takes your interest and have a bite at some of these. So we've got things like Arceus Gengar, one of regionals. There's Arceus Duraludon, which has also got very close and is still sort of sticking around. We've got some Mustard variants going on. We've got Malamar VMAX. We've got Whimsicott doing well at Sao Paulo. Stephane, why don't you kick us off with one of these ones that has caught your eye or that you've been putting some time into?
Well, it's not really something that caught my eye, but something that if I want to mention something, Arceus Duraludon, I think, is something that people don't really respect right now. And I understand. I think if you listen to any top player, if you ask any top player, they will say that deck is bad. Well, maybe not bad, but that deck is not something we like. And I don't want to play it, for example, because it's not a deck that you can really express any skill with. It's not a deck you can outplay anyone with. I mean, maybe if you play Hyper Potion and you just attach energy at the right time or something, but yeah, you don't have a lot of decisions to make, except what to take on the Starbirth. Maybe that's something to do with them. But otherwise, it's a very linear deck, not a lot to do. You can get countered by things like Ego Horn, and there's not much you can do about that either. So it's not something that, a top player would probably recommend or want to play. But statistically, the deck is still pretty good. It still has some good matchups. It can still beat decks like Mew VMAX that plays no basic or only one basic energy, which is the majority of Mew VMAX lists right now. It's a bit awkward against that. And I don't think the deck is very great into other Arceus variants usually. So I don't think Arceus Duraludon is the secret best deck or anything, but I think that it's a deck that continuously people don't want. They just want to ignore and say just okay, yeah, that exists, but it's tier 3 or something. And I think it's better than that. I think it's something that some people you won't expect, like newer players, people who are not that experienced. It's probably a good choice for them because the deck doesn't require a lot of that much knowledge, that much. I'm not gonna say no skill. It's just you don't know if you're playing Mew, you need to know basically what you need to expect a lot of cards and know exactly how to play against something with Moltres, something with Path to the Peak, and lots of things you have to consider. But Arceus Duraludon, you basically know you don't have to know that much. You're gonna do the same thing anyway. That doesn't matter. And and I think the deck, if it hits the right matchups, I think the deck has the potential to go far. So yeah, again, I don't love the deck. I won't be playing it unless, never say never, I guess, but very unlikely that I play it. But yeah, just wanted to mention in case no one would.
I actually think that's pretty important to mention because I know that some people are cutting Echoing Horn, for example, from their Mew because it's like going down in play and they want to like make that space for other maybe tech cards or other things. So keeping it on the radar is no bad thing. I was actually playing it yesterday just on stream because I was focusing on other things and was like, I just want to click 2 buttons and still have win cons. But yeah, it's still annoying and it's actually interesting against like the fringe decks. It seems to do pretty well against some of the lower tier stuff. It is just one of those sort of flat track bully archetypes, and it actually has one of the highest win rates on Play Limitless still. I know it might be historical data from when it was popular early on, but it's still like way up there from when I was checking yesterday. So yeah, pretty interesting. Xander, do you want to jump on any other like more fringe Arceus build?
Yeah, I'd say that the stuff that I haven't personally been experimenting with, but I know people have been looking at a lot of the mustard decks, specifically with the Beedrill and the single strike mustard, just because it has the potential to completely swing a game. Arceus in of itself has the issue of one-shotting something, but the Beedrill really takes care of that, especially for special energy decks. Like it was really good in Salt Lake City too, because a lot of people like Gengar there. just their crew players who play single strike usually. And so Beedrill being able to do something against these kind of decks is always just good for that. I don't think that it's going to be super good moving forward for the fact that Mew is going to be playing 1 or 2 Psychic Energy now, kind of as a standard. I wouldn't be surprised to see 2 Psychic Energy come back into a lot of Mew lists, or just play the 1 like Tord was, I think, for Training Court, that sort of thing. And the other comment I had was on Arceus Duraludon. I like Stephane. I think that deck is really good. Just at its core, you play 4 bosses orders. You have a big VMAX that one-shots basic Vs. It's hard to go wrong. I think I would prefer playing something like Drew's deck with the Arceus Gengar, because the Gengar has the possibility to one-shot the Mew VMAX. You've got 250 damage as opposed to the 240, so one thing that Drew did to really hammer down the Arceus matchup is to choice band his Gengar and then Tool Scrapper the Big Charm. So you do one-shot Arceus V-Star. There's no way around that, whereas in the Arceus mirror otherwise, I think that the water Arceus Inteleon is pretty favored against Duraludon because you have so many water energies. You can attack with Inteleon, you have quick shooting, whereas with the Gengar version, if they have the potential to one-shot the V-Star, there's no really way to come back from that. They're already so far ahead in the prize trade that kind of too hard to come back from.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I always thought it was kind of interesting that after winning a regional, it wasn't really picked up by more players. Really strange, but yeah, you articulated well that at least into Mew and Arc Intel, which we're expecting are probably 2 of the most powerful and prevalent decks at EUIC, it's got a good game plan into both of those. Robin, what about you? Do you want to cherry pick another Arceus variant?
I think biggest problem with most of the Arceus decks is that they just lose against Arceus and Inteleon mostly, because Inteleon is just a better engine than whatever other options there are. And especially if you play like Crowbat and Luminion, then you just always lose the mirrors basically, because yeah, they're just really bad against the mirrors. So that's one big problem. I think the Arceus Gengar deck was okay, because like with the Bibarel, he didn't need 2 prizes, and the Gengar is actually can one kill Arceus in the mirror. So that deck seemed like pretty good. Not sure why it did nothing. It's probably like people already had their decks locked in but by that point and didn't want to pick up a completely new deck. So maybe we will see some of it at EUIC. But it's kind of unfortunate that Gengar has fighting weakness, so it just that's a problem for the deck for sure.
Would that lead you, especially maybe even with some of these like mustard builds, because you're oftentimes playing like Flygon or something, would you think about playing a fighting tech Pokemon? Like we saw Sandaconda, there could even be Urshifu, there could be like Lycanroc VMAX. What do you think is the best like Arceus plus fighting combination that we have out there? Do you have any ideas, Stephane, maybe?
I like Arceus with Urshifu, with Rapid Strike Urshifu. I think you can do something pretty interesting where you play Arceus, Rapid Strike Urshifu, and some dark stuff for Mew mostly. So dark stuff is usually like Crobat VMAX, because then you can play Crobat for draw power, because you don't have you need support Pokemon. And you can then evolve a Crobat V into Crobat VMAX, and that gives you an attacker for VMAX and for Malamar, because Crobat VMAX's first attack is great against Malamar.
Yeah.
And yeah, you need some more dark stuff, like maybe Galarian Moltres V or Hoopa V. Hoopa V also allows you to hit Urshifu itself for weakness. And I've been playing stuff like this recently. I saw some Japanese lists that were basically doing that, and tried them, and it's not bad. Obviously, you're playing a lot of 2-price Pokemon, like you have Bibarel, but other than that, it's basically only 2-price Pokemon. So if you don't set up very well, you can definitely lose, because like Mew starts taking prizes, and even though you take prizes too, they just win the race. But the fact that you hit for so many different weaknesses gives you, it gives you some good matchups against a lot of stuff. Like you can be a bit behind against Arceus deck and then just come back because you one-shot them with Gale Thrust. If they play Dunsparce, you can use Gmax Rapid Flow to knock it out and knock out a Drizzle at the same time or something. So the deck has a lot of attackers, maybe not a lot of options, because you don't have a Drizzle engine, so you don't choose always what you want to do. You have to just draw cards with Bibarel. or Crobat. But yeah, the deck is not bad at all in my opinion. And I think if I were to play Arceus with something fighting, it would definitely be that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you touched on Hooper V as well. Do you feel like that is just a card that's almost as important as like a Dunsparce, for example, for helping combat Urshifu? Because, you know, just being a 220 hit point Mon, sure, they could try and rapid flow it and set it up for damage, but it's always going to come in and take those 3 prizes. Is that something that maybe is concerning for you, Robin, or is a card that you'd think about adding into some like dark package Arceus decks?
Yeah, it's more scary than Dunsparce, I think, for Urshifu specifically. Like, if you play Arceus with Darkness, then Hooper's probably a good option. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't really tried it out, like played against it much, but it seems more scary than the Dunsparce, I think.
Nice one. Well, thanks for coming on, guys. I just want to go around one more time and just give me your top 2 considerations going into the tournament, and maybe just like 1 or 2 cards that you're thinking about are like important includes for you within that certain list. Let's start with you, Xander.
So obviously, no secret, one of my top decks is just going to be Arceus and B-Barrel, run it back. Some cards I would want to include in that are going to be Dunsparce and or Manaphy. Like I said earlier, your Urshifu matchup probably isn't still the best, but at least by adding the Dunsparce, you should have a much better matchup against the Galarian Zapdos V decks, or those including that to try and beat Arceus. So that would be a card that's a for sure add into a lot of the Arceus decks if you're not playing some secondary attacker like Dark Pokemon, or like Stephane was saying, some Urshifu. And then I would say the secondary deck that I'm thinking about would probably be just like Robin's Urshifu deck, just because it did well before. It's got a lot of options, can be fragile at times, so I'm a little worried about more mana fee, more that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, and someone's in the right hands of a player, it can do very well, and that was seen in Liverpool.
Robin?
I'm pretty sure I'm going to play something with Inteleon and Darkness Pokemon, and then it could be Urshifu, could be Arceus, could be, I don't know, just neither, and just like the plain Dark Inteleon deck. I think that's okay as well. Yeah, just something like that. I just think it feels way too good to play Inteleon and Moltres to not play it.
Very interesting. And a second choice?
Second choice, probably just normal Arceus Inteleon with water energy.
Sure. Stephane?
Yeah, I think I probably end up playing something with Arceus. I've played a lot of it recently. I like it a lot, and it has that kind of Zoroark feeling where you don't deal the most damage, you're not one-shotting stuff, but you have many options. Mostly like all the Inteleon variants, you have a lot of supporters you can play. You have like Terran Scare, like Rayhan, stuff like this. So you have a lot of choice, and yeah, Arceus Inteleon would probably be my top choice among the Arceus variants. I think if I'm playing that, I'm probably including Dunsparce, as we already talked about, and Manaphy. I think they're better together because the Manaphy protects Dunsparce against Rapid Strike Urshifu, and Manaphy is also just great against Jolteon. Like, it helps that matchup so much, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And I do expect some Jolteon, so I would rather, take one spot for that matchup. I think that's worth it. A second choice, lots of them, but let's say just Mew VMAX because no one else is mentioning it, and it's definitely something that I would still consider. I know a lot of people are moving away and playing into Arceus instead, but it's still definitely a very strong deck. As I said, I'm liking Pumpkaboo in it. I'm not committed to it or anything, but yeah, it's been good for me so far, and I'm continuing to test it in you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. I'm going to give you a chance to do shout-outs and whatnot now, so let's go reverse order. Stephane?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. So yeah, thank you to the people who listened for listening. If I do videos and articles for Channel Fireball, so channelfireball.com. Check out my writing there and my videos if you want to, and follow me on Twitter as well.
Robin?
I sometimes, like once every few months, write an article on Limitless, TCG.com, So check that out for very infrequent articles. And so shout out to Dragon Shield that recently sponsored all of Limitless. That's and sent us a bunch of stuff. That was pretty cool.
Nice. And Xander?
I would say, like Stephane, find me on Channel Fireball. I don't post videos, but I do write articles probably once a month on there. And then other than that, you can find me on Twitter, where I post mostly Pokemon, but sometimes college things, and then occasionally, I don't know, random thoughts throughout the day. So that's about it.
Thanks so much, guys. This was really insightful, and I just love listening to all three of you. So wish you the best of luck at EUIC, and I'll see you guys there. Cheers.